What I really want you to do first of all is grab, so you can come in and grab yourself a little stalk, because I'm going to talk to you about the difference between the two main species. So if you crush that between your fingers and smell it, tell me what you smell.
Lavender.
I knew someone was going to say that. But what are the notes that you smell? Can you smell anything distinct from lavender?
It's camphorous.
So you think it's camphorous? Okay, that's awesome. Come over here. Okay, so now
What is this? That was hit coat.
that's head coat. So now grab some of this.
Is it Augustifolia?
It's angustifolia, yeah. So now grab this and crush some of this in your hand, ideally in the other hand.
Yeah.
So you don't, and smell that. So now what do you smell?
It's lighter, much lighter.
Yeah.
Yeah, sharper.
Sharper, right?
Yeah.
So that sharp smell, that's actually camphor.
Yeah.
Because this is intermedia, this is Provence, and this has about 40% camphor in the essential oil. The head coat that we were smelling, that has about 0.1%, if that. Sometimes it's as low as 0.04. And the largest constituent in the essential oil from the head coat and from most angustifolias is the linalool acetate. And of course it's the linalool acetate which makes it relaxing, and it's a great anti-inflammatory and good for burns, whereas the intermedia with all this camphor is actually stimulating. So if you encounter people that say, well, I tried lavender, it didn't work for me, it didn't put me to sleep at all, they're probably using lavandin, because lavandin gives a much higher yield. So a lot of essential oil that you find out on the market, unless it's labelled with the Latin binomial name, which is, your Levandula intermedia or angustifolia, and preferably even as far as to give their variety, then if it's not labelled like that, it's quite likely going to be an intermedia species. So there are a couple of intermedia species that are more like angustifolia. Arborealis is one they grow in Provence that has less camphor and a little more linalool acetate, but it just doesn't get nearly the same. And of course the yield from this is 2 to 3 times, if not more, than what you'll get off an angustifolia, which is why they grow it for commercial production.
So is this considered French?
No, this is considered French. So the common names are very misleading.
Yes.
There's French lavender, there's English lavender, and some people think that is intermedia and angustifolia, but it isn't. There's just, they also sometimes call angustifolia Lavandula vera, and vera of course means true, so they call it true lavender. French lavender, and the French lavender in France is angustifolia, so that's actually English lavender, use that, which is why you just have to use the Latin binomial name, and that's where you have Lavandula intermedia, which is actually a cross between spike lavender, and which is Lavandula spicata, and Lavandula angustifolia. And this is it's a fantastic plant because it's very vigorous, it gives you a great yield of oil, and it grows all the way down to sea level, right? So spicata only grows at sea level. Angustifolia really only starts producing decent oil at about 750 feet, which is exactly where we are. So yeah, so we're lucky up here that we have enough to get really nice quality oil, which is fun to play around with. We don't get a whole bunch from this, but we do get enough to play with, and of course that's what makes it fun. So yeah, there's a lot to learn about the varieties of lavender, and you do start to train your nose. The more you pick it, it's like that sort of sinks into your olfactory memory. And once you start to be around it a lot, you can really distinguish, even from blank samples of oil, what is an intermedia and what's a true lavender or an angustifolia.
Well, good morning again, everybody. I'm Doreen Peterson, President and Founder of the American College of Healthcare Sciences. I'm here today with my daughter, Erica Yigzau, our Chief Strategy Officer of American College of Healthcare Sciences. And we're here at beautiful Sherwood Lavender Farm, and we are about to distill some lavender. Thank you very much for harvesting our lavender this morning. What we're actually going to be working with today is Lavandula angustifolia, and later on we will talk a little bit about the differences in the varieties. But One thing that's of interest in lavender is, first of all, in fact, with any plant before you distill it, is really understanding where the essential oil is within the plant. And for lavender, the essential oil is within primarily the flower, a little bit in the leaf, and ideally you want to harvest it. This is the perfect time for harvesting. And there's not a lot of sun out, which is also perfect, even though we might like a sunny day. It's perfect because as the sun gets high in the sky and as the sun gets hotter and as the environment warms up, essential oils will volatilize out of the plants and fill the air, which is why, as you walk by a lavender field, you can smell lavender. And so your yield is, a little bit lower if you harvest at the wrong time. Plus, you could be losing active constituents that are vital to your essential oil at the end. So, harvesting at the right time. The other thing to appreciate is what the oil gland actually looks like. So without getting too technical, if I was to take a really strong magnifier and look at lavender, I would see that there is a cell on the flower that's quite long. It's called a trichome, and essential oil cells, the part of the plant that produces the oil, is going to be a little bit different in every plant, but in lavender it's on the end of this trichome, and it really is quite bizarre looking. It looks like something out of outer space, and quite beautiful as well. So if you ever get a chance to see some close-up photos, and if
we'll send you some.
Yeah, we'll send you some, and if any of you are in the program, the aromatherapy program, you also get some information on this, but we can definitely send you this. So it's fascinating to see, and also with lavender and with the trichome, it means you have to handle it somewhat carefully, because you can easily rupture those cells, the sacs on the end of these trichome, these long cells, and start losing oil. Of course, we should have talked about that before we harvested, but never mind. There's always a second time. And
everyone was handling it really.
Yeah, you were. And definitely when you're picking amongst bees like that, you have to be really careful. First of all, talk about safety. Safety is a really extremely important topic when you want to start using essential oils. And Erica touched on some of the issues that you might come across. Basically, every essential oil is a unique product. So while we might have some very generalized statements about essential oils in general across the board, some oils you have to be very specific with as far as contraindications and safety, and of course some individuals. So let's look a little bit deeper at that. And every individual is going to have somewhat a different reaction. And there are a number of things to consider. Also, the age of the oil. If an oil is an older oil that has started to oxidize, you're more likely to have a skin reaction. So, for example, tea tree oil, if it's oxidized, tea tree oil can cause rashes and sensitivity. The same with bergamot. The European Union has recently put together a list of essential oils and essential oil constituents that are considered allergens. And, obviously it's going to be different for a leave-on product or a wash-off product, but they're very specific about the parts per million that you can have in your end product. Of any essential oil containing linalool or linalool, monoterpene alcohol, it can cause a reaction on the skin if it's applied directly, if an essential oil contains it. It can also cause an allergic reaction if it's inhaled, particularly if someone's sensitive anyway. If somebody tends to have a lot of allergies to other things, the things they're most likely going to be allergic to are things from the Lamiaceae family, which is lavender is part of, and also from the Asteraceae family, which is like your chamomile, for example. So chamomile can be a problem for some people if they tend to be allergic to lots of different things. So those are some things you want to think about. As Erica mentioned, it's really worthwhile if you're looking at a topical application to do a skin patch test beforehand. When you're doing a skin patch test, you're going to drop your essential oil in there.
Why don't you do one as an example?
Yes, and when you're working with a client, it's really useful to blend the oil with a little base oil beforehand, because you really don't want a client to experience anything too adverse. And sometimes, the burning of cinnamon, for example, can be quite unnerving. The intense cold and followed by rapid heating of, which is called rubefacient effect, of peppermint can be really unnerving. And a lot of people just don't want to experience that. Do we have some oil we can?
Yeah, I'm going to go get some from the kitchen.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
just keep talking and I'll.
So I want to share with you using an oil. Sometimes, if you're, let's say, desperate, you can, even do, somebody like me who knows, I've been using essential oils now for 35 years. I've studied it. I've lived it. I should know better, right? But here I am in Bali. In fact, I just finished a study tour, and I'm sitting in the airport, and I started feeling just not great. Like, you can feel when that stomach starts. And before I knew it, I was in the airport bathroom, which is not the greatest in Bali. There's a few stalls there and not much toilet paper. In fact, I don't think any TP whatsoever. And I am not doing well at all. So pretty much I got what we would call Delhi belly or Bali belly in and really quickly. I'd eaten some lunch, sitting in the airport at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, had a flight to Singapore that I had to catch, and before I knew it, without going into too much detail, of course, because we've just had lunch, it was not a good experience. So when I got to Singapore, I started developing really bad stomach pains. Now, when I travel, I take 1 drop of Cinnamomum zeylanicum, which is the bark oil, not the leaf, because the bark is lower in cancer. I take 1 drop a day in the morning. I just put it on my tongue, drink a little milk or something to wash it down, and call it good. And it is a great oil, a great anti-infectious oil, very good for E. coli. It's been shown, evidence and research has shown it's very good for as an antibacterial, anti-infectious oil. So whatever this was pretty virulent. By the time I got to Singapore, I was not feeling good at all. I then had to get up early and do the long haul back to LA. So I lay in bed. Robert went off to the bar without me, lay there. I just grabbed my cinnamon oil and just sort of doused it on my stomach straight and started massaging my stomach, because if you can apply, for example, to the soles of your feet or to the lobes of your ear or to your wrists, palm of your hands, a variety of other places in your body, and it's going to be absorbed fairly quickly through your skin, and you're inhaling it at the same time. Of course, that's the beauty of massaging with essential oils. If you have sort of a dual administration route via the skin and also via inhalation. Well, of course, the minute I did it, I knew I'd done the wrong thing. But now I'm in a hotel in Singapore, no milk, no base oil, and I'm like, all right, what's going to happen? I mean, it was really intense. It was burning, it was intense, it was red. Obviously, I washed it because that was all I had, really that was going to... Anyway, I mean, it didn't... Here I am, I'm alive. It's a couple of years later, however many years later. It didn't blister. I got over it. But you wouldn't want that experience for a client. It's intense. Similarly, you don't want, somebody mentioned oregano, you wouldn't apply that directly. But even oils that you wouldn't imagine, like chamomile, if somebody is potentially an allergic type individual, like peppermint, Eucalyptus, anything with 1,8 cineol. Now, when you smell eucalyptus, you're really smelling eucalyptol, which is an oxide, and it's also known as 1,8 cineol, and it's also known as cajaputol. Depending on the plant it's in, it's all the same constituent, and it gives that lovely, you really want to breathe deeper. You know what I'm talking about with eucalyptus. That actually is an undesirable constituent for children. You shouldn't put it on young children's chests. You don't want children to inhale that. It can cause almost an asthmatic type reaction. So anything with 1,8 cineol should not be given to kids under 2 years. I'm really quite cautious with essential oils in young children. I'm also very cautious with essential oils in pregnant women. The other thing Erica mentioned was estrogen mimickers. There are a number of essential oils that are estrogen mimickers. There are clary sage, lavender. Let me see, I know there are a couple more. And these are the sort of things you would learn in the aromatherapy program, the contraindications for each oil. Now, while an estrogen mimicker is not going to be something that affects every individual, if somebody has estrogen-dependent breast cancer, you, I think, would want to err on the side of caution and not use an essential oil, or not suggest or recommend an essential oil that could potentially mimic estrogen in the body with an individual who was suffering from estrogen-dependent breast cancer. And the same with herbs as well. Any botanical that has that potential. I mean, why bother? Just find something else to use. So the other thing that you really want to be aware of is the difference between sensitivity, skin irritation, and sensitization. Anyone heard of those two words? Anyone understand the difference? Okay, Carolyn, you do. So for those of you that don't, sensitization and sensitivity. So sensitivity is basically, I'm going to put cinnamon on my stomach like I told you I did, straight cinnamon, and right away I had a reaction. It was irritated, it was red, it was painful, it was burning. This is, a sensitivity. Now, you don't have to use something as extreme as cinnamon. You could have a sensitivity towards, let's see, you could have a sensitivity towards clove, you could have a sensitivity towards, bless you, you could have a sensitivity towards a number of different oils. But sensitization is where you are using an oil maybe repeatedly over a couple of weeks and you suddenly develop a rash. It might not even be where you're putting the oil. What is that about? That is actually involving the immune system. So it's triggered something in your immunity. Your helper cells are on the rampage and they're trying to overcome it in the body and the skin, or even internally you're starting to have an allergic reaction. That is sensitization, and that usually happens over a couple of weeks, and it's involving the immune system, and it's usually excessive exposure. So you want to just lay off it, stop using it, and usually it will calm down and go away. But it may be that you're always going to be sensitized to that oil, so you just avoid it. The other thing, let's see, what have we talked about? We've talked about sensitivity, irritation, we've talked about sensitization. The other thing I want to mention is photosensitivity. So even though it's overcast today, we know that there's still UV rays pounding down on us. I've got my sun hat on, purely because I've got, skin that burns easily, and I'm very anxious. Growing up in New Zealand, you're exposed to a lot of UV rays. The protective covering down in the southern hemisphere is very, very slight. It's very slim. It's very, basically a lot of UV rays are really all around you as you grow up. A lot of us grow up with things like pterygiums. I have one. It's UV damage in the white of your eye. As you get to be my age, you start developing, skin cancers and things like that taken off. So it's just growing up. Chile's the same. It's just growing up in a country where there's a lot of UV rays. So having said that, if I right now was wearing a lotion that had bergamot essential oil in it, I would most likely burn a lot more easily than if I had, no essential oil in my moisturizer. And why is that? Because some oils are what we call photosensitive. They make you more susceptible to UV rays. They make you more susceptible to burning. They can really, create a bad rash. We had an experience actually where we were on our way to summer school, and you know how when you're in the duty-free and you get given lots of samples, somebody gave us a Lancome cream, and we were applying it. It smelled pretty good. It smelled of bergamot. It was really nice. And we get to France and we continue to use it. We're out in the fields, and we get home one night, back to the study camp, and Erica had this really severe burn on her arm.
Yeah, it almost looked like I'd burned myself with hot water. It became thickened and scaly, and it was crazy because it was on my arm, and it was like, when we were in trying on the cream, I'd done that, and it was like that was the patch. It was
you could see where her hand
had rubbed it on,
rubbed the cream on her arm, and it was just like imprinted on her. And continued to burn even after, so she had to basically be covered up for the rest of the trip.
It was crazy, and that was a commercial Lancome cream. So
of course now in the European Union, they require labelling on products that would contain an essential oil or an essential oil constituent that might be, something that causes photosensitivity.
And you can use a bergaptine-free bergamot because it's the bergaptine in the bergamot oil that causes the photosensitivity. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. The thing that's really important about sensitivity is that you'll see people who will suddenly develop a rash, and they say, well, it can't possibly be this oil because I've been using this oil for years or months or weeks, so it can't possibly be that because I've never had a reaction to it. And they don't realise that the sensitization effect can happen over a course of time, and you suddenly basically trigger an overreaction of your immune system, which is what an allergic response is, really. So yeah, it's something to sort of keep in mind if you have someone who says, oh, I've got this weird rash, and you ask them what oils they're using, and they say, well, I've been using those for years and never had a problem. You might want to tell them about sensitization. And I'm not sure what Doreen told you while I was gathering some oils for us to test, but I think it's kind of, I call it fun because I'm a geek, right? I like experimenting on myself, but obviously if you're working with clients with aromatherapy or with kids and different groups, you're not going to be testing things to try and get a reaction. You're going to be testing the dilution that you're proposing to use, and you're going to be testing it in the way that you're going to use it. So if you're going to be using it in a diffuser, you might test it in a diffuser and keep a close watch on everybody and make sure you don't have a reaction. If you're going to be using it in a 2% dilution in coconut or sweet almond oil, that's what you're going to test, right? But when you're looking to experiment on yourself a little bit and see, what is the worst that could happen if someone puts straight cinnamon on themselves, like Doreen said, put it on your stomach. We've also experimented with putting too much peppermint in a bath, because that's something that people do. I don't know whether it's American or what, but people think, 2 drops is good. Well, 20 drops is better. So I'm going to put 20 drops in. And it's really important I clearly smell good. The bees are following me around. So it's really important to remember that more is not necessarily better. And that you might have, you really need to emphasize that with clients or with people you're working with, because they think it's natural. It can't possibly hurt me. So I'm going to add extra because my kid has extra ADHD or whatever's going on. So it's really interesting when you do the skin patch testing, and that's what we're going to talk about now, to do it with something that kind of is going to cause a bit of a reaction, right? Where you'd never do that with a client. She's got clove, right? She's hardcore. But of course, we'd never advocate this if you had any conditions, personally, like if you were pregnant or elderly or had high blood pressure or anything like that, then you're not going to be experimenting on yourself. But skin patch testing, super easy. There's really no magic to it. And this
So
is,
basically I'm going to take my oil, and here I have clove bud essential oil, and of course clove can come from the leaf or the bud. It's Psyllium aromaticum. I'm going to place a few drops right here.
and then we're going to cover it with a Band-Aid, which is probably not going to want to stick now. Oh,
Yes, it will.
let's see. Okay.
So we're going to leave that on for
Wipe off some of that extra. You don't need to take a bath in it.
so we're going to leave that on for, let's say, 20 minutes. So by 25 to 3, we'll see what's happened.
Or until she starts to get a reaction.
Yeah.
At that point, we're going to wash it off.
Yeah.
But this is a really good thing for people to do because you will meet these people, right? You meet them in every industry. You meet them, master gardeners know this, you meet the people who say, oh, I drink Roundup. Like, Roundup is so safe, I would drink it. And you meet the people who say, essential oils are so safe, I would drink, I take half a bottle of oregano every day and I never get a cold and it's so safe. Whoa, Nelly, it's super strong. And while it certainly is an amazing oil and has a lot of potential benefits, eventually your body's going to hit that point where your liver says, dude, I cannot deal with any more ketones, and you're going to start having a problem. So, these kind of tests can show people how powerful they are really simply without them really having exposure to a lot of potential harm. Because we do see that a lot. People are like, it's perfectly safe, I can use tons of it, I don't need to dilute it. Other people need to dilute it, but not me. I'm hardcore, right? So you do see that a lot, and that's where it's really useful to do this. Because if you do it with clove or cinnamon, it's going to start to sting on. If you have skin, it's going to sting, right? I mean, that's just the reality, unless you're covered in leather.
So yeah, and just talking about your liver, what's interesting about working with essential oils that have phenols or ketones in them, the minute you know a little bit about what's in it, a little bit about what the contraindications are. But if you're working with oils with phenols and ketones, like oregano, for example, you've also got to be aware that your liver has this process called the P450 cytochrome pathway. This is like, I imagine this like I-5, like down this I-5 goes every major toxin, drug, pesticide, chemical that we ingest, whether we want to or not, whether we do it intentionally or not, throughout the day. And the liver starts to process it through this pathway and eventually either completely eradicates it, through the bowel or the kidney, or detoxifies it in some way. I mean, the liver is the most incredible powerhouse in the body, all the work it's doing. Now, if this P450 cytochrome pathway, just like I-5, if there's a traffic jam, if it's taken up with ketones and phenols, that you're thinking, oh my God, I'm doing my body real good here. A lot of the drugs and toxins and other materials, estrogen mimicking things we're taking into our body, will start circulating in the blood because there's only so much room on the freeway. So this is when you start thinking of like, oh, okay, I'm stuck in the traffic jam on I-5. I'm going to get off at this exit and I'm going to take, I've got my Waze on and I'm going to, take my detour. And when your body decides to shoot some toxin or something off on a detour, this is when it starts to circulate in the blood and maybe gets to the breast area where you have your estrogen receptor sites, and the estrogen mimicking substance locks on to the estrogen receptor site, even though it's not estrogen, it's an estrogen mimicker, because your cytochrome pathway is no longer able to manage getting that stuff out of your body. So that's the way I like to think about why you would not be indulging in a lot of these oils to an excessive amount. You really have to give your body the leeway and the room to get rid of all the stuff that we don't even intentionally ingest on a day-to-day basis. Well, should we look at my... So here we've done a skin patch test. We've dropped clove bud, Psyllium aromaticum, onto my arm. and it was undiluted. It's been on there for 20 minutes, and
It's like, yeah.
I mean,
I think the red's from the Band-Aid.
it's a little red. It stung a little bit. But if that was cinnamon, I don't know, do you have cinnamon?
Yeah, I think I put cinnamon out.
If that was cinnamon, I'll do another one with cinnamon just to show you.
Yeah, here's cinnamon.
And
You don't have to put yourself through that if you don't.
no,
Oh no, she loves it. She loves it. She lives for the stuff. Yeah, that is a little bit red. These Band-Aids
Try this
are
one.
kind of like industrial strength Band-Aids, because I mean I live on a farm, so I need industrial strength Band-Aids. Stephanie's helping them. And then maybe actually you could talk next about what actually makes an oil an essential oil, because that's a question we get a lot. Oh, I've taken the thing out of here, so normally you have a dropper, but I can't think. I was blending with this, so I took the dropper thing out, and there's hardly any left in here, so it's not like I can do that much
damage.
And I am experienced. Children do not do this at home. This is also pretty thick. No, it's not. It's just hardly any in here. There you go. Look
So
at that
here
one
we have
drop.
our drop. Yes, one drop. That was
I
excellent.
know.
Here we have our one drop of Cinnamomum xylanicum bark. So what makes an essential oil?
And it's nice, the cinnamon.
Oh, it's beautiful. What makes an essential oil essential? Very good question. I love this question. So the one thing that is a common denominator with all essential oils is volatility. And what do I mean by volatility? Anyone want to take a guess?
It's unstable.
It is unstable. Absolutely, it's unstable. Volatile is basically it evaporates. So the minute you take the lid off an essential oil, the aromatic molecules within that bottle start to come out into the atmosphere. And they are going to be bouncing around, and in order for you to inhale and smell, something has to be volatile. The aromatic molecule has to actually enter your nostrils, and that is the one factor that makes it essential. Now, if you take, just as a comparison, the top off a bottle of, let's just say, olive oil or sweet almond, and you sit it on the counter. You take the top off, let's just take cinnamon, you sit that on the counter. Which one do you think you're going to smell?
Cinnamon.
Right, the cinnamon. Because the olive oil or sweet almond has no aromatic very, very limited amount of aromatic molecules. I mean, you've got to really stick your head in, right, to really smell some, virgin olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, smell that lovely richness, but you're immediately, those aromatic molecules are going to start bouncing up out of your cinnamon. So volatility is really the primary factor that makes an oil essential. Now, essential is an interesting word. It's said that, I don't know if you've heard of Paracelsus. Paracelsus, the famous alchemist, way back when, said he coined the term essential. And they say that his idea of essential was the spirit of the plant. And you might see this in popular books. The essential part of the plant, the essential oil, is considered the spirit, sort of the nature of the plant itself. So there's that definition of it as well. And really, who's to say that's not correct also. So, that's another way of seeing it, another overlay. Organoleptic testing. Now, when we talk about organoleptic testing, we're not just talking about inhalation. What else do you think we're talking about?
Allergies.
Yes, because we've already talked about safety and allergy, and that is always an overriding focus when you're working with essential oils. But what else do we use when we're trying to evaluate something?
Smell, touch, taste.
Perfect. Perfect. Let's look at all of our senses. So, let's find an oil we can use. Let's try bergamot, since we've been talking about bergamot. And it's organic. Phew, thank goodness, it's our oil. Otherwise, I wouldn't be using it. Do you know, I will be out of stock on an oil if I can't find it certified organic, just to let you know. We will not stock, particularly citrus. I was evaluating oils the other day, because whenever we buy in an oil, and we buy from distillers where I visited, I know them, but if for some reason their crop, they can't get it, and they've bought in a conventional, and they'll usually say, well, Doreen, it's not certified organic, but we've had it tested, it's fine, here it is. If it's citrus, I'm not even going to look at it. I just will not look at it, because, it's just my particular thing. I've just seen too many pesticides used. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to smell this oil. Let's work through these things one at a time. Now, with organoleptic testing, we want to first of all make sure we've got enough time to do it. So you want to take your time. You want to be in an environment where it's not really hugely fragrant to begin with. So you want a fairly calm environment as far as not many other competing aromas. You want to ensure that you're in an environment where there's some airflow, because you don't want to be doing your organoleptic testing work in a closed environment where you start inhaling and maybe experience olfactory overload or fatigue, where you stop smelling, you can't smell anymore, and we can talk about that later. So the first thing we're going to do is inhale bergamot. And I like to use a perfume test strip. I mean, you can just inhale from the bottle, but the beauty of the perfume test strip is it not only allows you to inhale, and I should just be doing one drop, but for some reason it's a warm day, so it's really coming out. The beauty of doing the perfume testing strip is it also permits you to look at the colour. And not only that, yes, you can see if it stains the strip, and not only that, you can leave it over a period of, sorry Dominic, I didn't make you one. If you want to pass that around, I only made 7. Oh no, maybe I made enough. Oh yeah, I did. So the beauty of the strip is that you can leave it sitting. You can leave it sitting up to 24 hours, maybe even longer, and keep inhaling it throughout the time, and just see how that oil does what's called dry down. How does it evaporate? What's left after 12 hours? What's left after 24 hours? Now, say for example there's absolutely nothing, no aroma whatsoever left after 12 hours. What does that make you think?
Fast evaporating.
Fast evaporating, right. And this is sort of the start of blending. When you understand that it's fast evaporating, it's called a top note. And when an oil's a top note, you know that it contains a lot of monoterpenes, a lot of alcohols. They're very simple constituents. If you were to look at them chemically, there are not too many pieces in the chain. They're very simple. And as an oil becomes more of a slow evaporator, maybe even after 3 or 4 days it's still on the strip, that's when you start getting very complex constituents, and they're considered to be a middle or what's called a base note. And when you blend, you want to have a nice harmonious mixture of top, middle and base. Very, very quick discussion on that. And it's a nice way to start building your aromatic library in your memory of knowing what's a top, middle and base. The next thing we're going to do with bergamot, and I saw you doing it, is, good job Tiffany, is we're going to take a little bit, I'm just going to pass the bottle around, take a little drop, and if you didn't get enough off your strip, and feel it in your fingers. And when you feel an oil, rub your fingers together, it does feel a little oily, but it's not going to feel continue to feel oily. It's not going to feel like you would have olive oil between your fingers. Eventually it's going to volatilize away and it will just completely dissipate. Now, some oils do tend to be diluted in commerce, and one oil in particular that they do this with is sandalwood oil. And sandalwood oil is frequently diluted, and unfortunately diluted with, quite nasty stuff like DPG, dipropylene glycol. Diethyl phthalate's another one they use. Diethyl phthalate is a carcinogen. It makes the sandalwood go further. You can't detect it unless you're looking at a GCMS. You can't smell it. But this is a great test to do for any oil. The other thing you can do is now it should be all gone. Is it gone off everybody's fingers? See? We should have olive oil here to try it against, but it's a great way of really seeing what volatility is. It just completely dissipates. Now, what I also like to do, and of course you don't have to do this bit, I like to taste it. I just do that. That's all I do. And you'll find that some essential oils, once you develop your sense of what an essential oil should taste like, you will really be able to start detecting the constituents. You'll be able to detect the constituents through both aroma and through taste. And with the constituent detection, it's a great way, I believe, to really begin to understand essential oils. And I teach this class where we call it "What Smell Is That?" And basically I have all of the constituents, not all, but a number of them, as individual constituents taken from the essential oil. And then we have the essential oils that they're in. So you would smell 1,8-cineol, and then you would smell the range of oils it's in and see if you can detect it. You would smell linalool and the range of oils it's in and see if you can detect it. And we would look at both the natural sourced active constituents, the singles, and also the synthetics, and see how different they are and what your different experiences are. Why I like to learn about specific constituents is you can learn a lot about the benefits of an essential oil just by knowing what's in it. So 1,8-cineol, I talked to you about before, which is generally contraindicated for children under 2, is a great opener for the lungs. And it doesn't matter what oil it's in, it's always going to have that respiratory benefit. So, once you smell it, you're going to be able to detect that in a number of oils, and you'll find that most useful, because if you don't have this oil, you just reach for an oil that smells like that and you can, use it in that way. Same with linalool acetate. It's in a number of oils, and it's a great ester, a great anti-inflammatory. And once you can detect it with your olfactory system and your taste, it really is a whole nother world, because you've got, just a level of expertise that you're not relying on memory, you're not relying on somebody telling you what it's for or reading it in a book or whatever, even though that's useful too. But remember the anise story. If somebody has had a negative experience, that's going to override anything. So it doesn't matter how much you read, oh, this is good for that, this is good for that, this is good for that. That subjective override is always there. So let's see, we've done smell, we've done taste, we've done touch. Colour. Let's look at colour. Did we get any colour in our strip? We did initially. There was a bit of green, didn't we? But because this is not bergaptine free, this oil. Now bergaptine is green, it has a green tinge, but it's the green that doesn't really leave a green on the strip. Now some oils will leave a colour on the strip, you want it, like patchouli for example is going to leave a brown on the strip. Let's see, what else leaves a colour on the strip? Vetiver leaves a colour on the strip.
What colour is vetiver?
Vetiver is a brown.
The chickens really want to know what's
I know. They're like, oh, can we drink that? Chickens in the hydrosol.
Look at all the oil that's in there now.
Isn't that wonderful?
Look at them looking in there.
We did good, you guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is organoleptic testing. Organoleptic testing you want to do with every oil. I really highly recommend it. First of all, you're getting an idea of the quality of your oil, and secondly, you're really getting to know the oil. You know, you're really getting to experience the oil. You're developing your own memory for aromatics, and it will really just help you in your aromatherapy journey.